Recording in progress.
Are ready.
This is the Techno Buffet podcast, episode number 582, recorded Thursday, April 28th, 2022, in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, welcome to a long overdue episode of the Techno Buffet podcast.
Yes. It has been a few weeks, hasn't it? It's been almost a month, one might say.
Well, the last episode was March 31st, 2022, unless you count me issuing an update because I was worried people would think we were both missing off the face of the earth.
And only I was missing off the face of the earth.
Well, I was worried about that. So this starts back on the 7th of April when I showed up for the podcast and you showed up for the podcast, and then my internet went down for 12 hours.
Yep. Remember that?
Yeah, so you didn't know where I was. So you essentially sent me messages, and I couldn't respond until the following morning because I was in a dead zone. And
Yep.
I responded, you were very pleased that I wasn't harmed. And then on the 14th, I showed up for the podcast as usual, and you weren't here.
See, I don't even remember that day.
That's why I was worried. And then
I remember that we had a podcast scheduled and you didn't show up. And then you told me the next day, hey, my internet went out. I'm like, okay. And the next Thursday I show up and you're like, I'm sorry, man. I can't do it today. It's holiday. And so.
not exactly. You've missed a few steps here. So on the
that
was the 21st.
I know that now, but
Yep.
at the time, it's like I don't even remember a Thursday going by.
Yeah, and then I sent you all these messages saying I can't do it next Thursday. Can we record on Tuesday? Because Thursday night was a holiday. And I didn't hear from you, so what I did was I recorded like a little thing saying I don't know where Jerry is. Here's some stuff to make sure that you know that we're alive, or I am at least. And then you popped up subsequently, and I said I better find an emergency way to find you.
Yes, and now we have each other's phone numbers and can call each other.
Yeah, you have my Google Voice number. So it is dedicated to you because nobody ever calls me on that number.
Does that mean that it doesn't reach you?
No, it's hooked into my phone, so it'll reach me. You can also make my computer ring. But I need to use it every so often so that the people at Google don't take it away.
All right.
So we have a lot to sort of catch up on because we have like 4 weeks worth of stuff. And some we may not talk about, but I figured
I say we go for an hour and then stop where we are and save the rest for next week. And
yeah, I just was worried that some of the things might be, some we don't need to talk about that much, but some of the things might actually be, by the time we get to them, too dated to talk about. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
luckily the first one's not.
Yeah. Well,
We're
the first one I really wanted to talk to you about, and I was saying this when I talked to myself last week.
Yep.
I really wanted to talk to you about Home Assistant 2022.4, which changed my life.
Did it really?
Well, I finally was able to get a whole bunch of automations that had not worked as reliably as I wanted to, working because of some of the tweaks they made to zones. So
really? What did they do to zones?
Okay, so Home Assistant 2022.4 added states to a zone. So the idea is the state of the zone, the major attribute is the number of persons currently in the zone. So in order to do this before, I had to create essentially a fake binary sensor that would take the names of all of the people who I had tracking for and say if A or B or C or D are in home, then true. Now all I have to do is say if zone is greater than 0.
I didn't even realize that that was an option. That zones have a... The zones now have a state.
Yeah.
Which is, as I understand it, the zone is the number of people in that zone.
Yeah, and for me, the thing that I care about is whether or not there is more than 0.
I don't even know if any of my zones have that state.
They'd have to have that state if you upgraded.
Right, but I don't know of it. I don't know of them having anything that would make the zone go above 1 or above 0.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question.
Yes, yes.
Do you have the Home Assistant app installed on your phone?
Yes.
Okay, and that app do you have it doing location sharing to your Home Assistant instance?
Yes.
Okay, and have you created a person inside Home Assistant representing you?
Yes.
Okay, then your zone should have a state of 1. Now you have...
Well, I have 3 people.
Yeah.
My wife, my daughter, myself.
But are you tracking them?
Well, my daughter also has the Home Assistant app on her phone, and it shares her location. But that just tells her that we're home or not home, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, to me, a zone is like the garage or the pool or the master bedroom.
Not really. That's very finite. A zone in this case is usually a little bigger. Room tracking is a bit hard. You technically can do it, but it's just so close. So I'll give you an example of what zones I have configured in Home Assistant right now.
Now, when you say zones, are these things you set up on the map?
Well, to some degree, yes. Originally, I had them in YAML, but I switched a lot of things over to dynamic configuration as part of my upgrade to 2022.4 because it just made life a little easier. I'd rather back up the storage directory. Admittedly, I like YAML, but it just gave it a lot more flexibility. So I deleted my manually configured zones in YAML, which were done by latitude and longitude, and just recreated them in the interface so they could be editable.
Okay, so I am confusing zones and areas.
Yeah, areas are rooms, pretty much.
Oh.
Zones are used for geofencing.
An area having a number of people in it would be kind of useful.
Yeah,
right?
I think they're going to get there only because there's you do have like room presence, but room presence is a really sort of hard thing to go with in terms of who's in a room as opposed to the idea that there's just someone in a room.
Right.
So with me, what I have is I have a few different zones set up for me, which is I have a zone for my place of business, so my home could know that I'm at work. I have one for the house itself, and it's a pretty wide circle because I think I go about a block and a half from my house for various reasons. I probably should make that a little smaller, but the reason is mostly if I sort of walk around the building. But then I have one called New York City. Now, New York City means that I'm in the metropolitan area, and I have that one. So essentially, the system can figure out whether or not I'm out of town or not. So I consider out of town to be outside of this broader zone, which all the other zones are inside. Then, for an amusing reason, I happen to have the zone of one particular restaurant that I put in there a few years ago. I use it for testing. So it knows when I'm in one of those places, and one of the long-standing things, if you remember, I was trying to do for years was I leave the office and it knows I'm going home so that it turns on my air conditioning. So it won't be so hot when I get here. And I've always had a problem with that because I was trying to explain this to somebody recently when I was talking about this in a different context. How does it know I'm going home? Because at least 90% of the places I might go to are on the same road to my house from the office, because I'd be heading in the right direction.
Have you fixed that? Have you found a solution to that?
No, I've been trying for a long time, and essentially I considered the possibility that I should just turn on the air conditioner unless I go somewhere else.
Because I have a similar type.
But you don't commute. And admittedly, I didn't commute for 2 years.
But I do leave the house every now and then, and my garage door is automated, right? To the point that I get in the car, I start the car, and the garage door opens. I drive away, and it closes. What I'd like is for it to open it as I show up. The problem, of course, being that it works via connection to my Wi-Fi. So when the car connects to the Wi-Fi, it opens the garage. When it disconnects, it closes it. And my car doesn't connect to the Wi-Fi until it's inside the garage. So I had the idea of maybe setting up 2 zones, like basically concurrent or concentric circles.
Yeah, which is what I did for that metropolitan area idea.
And, if I enter the first zone and then, 30 seconds later, I enter the second zone, then it opens the garage.
There is one other option.
What's that?
It's a hardware solution.
What's that?
So get yourself an ESP32.
Yes.
Put it in the garage and install ESP Home and have it act as a scanning device for a specific Bluetooth beacon that you keep in your car.
Okay.
So then these Bluetooth beacon is within range of the receiver, which is in your garage, it knows you're there or not. And that doesn't require...
A Bluetooth beacon is going to be good for what? 10 feet?
Is it 10 feet? I think it goes a little further than that. But how far do you want to be from your garage before the garage door opens?
About 300 feet.
I'm not sure. What's the range of Bluetooth LE? Let's look. Bluetooth LE is up to 400 meters. Again, I've never tested how far you can go, but it's unobstructed view. It might work.
I don't think Bluetooth LE is good for 400 meters. Maybe in an open space.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've never actually tested the maximum range. But that would work to some degree, but it wouldn't necessarily work for what you're looking for, and you have the problem of the Wi-Fi would have the same issue. I suppose you could do it by geofencing.
That's what I don't know.
But again, I'm not sure how fast it would update. But anyway, the other things that are good and new in Home Assistant 2022.4, you can now create your groups in the UI, which is much easier for me. This was always a problem that when I wanted, I have, for example, 2 independently controlled old school hi-hats in the ceiling, and I often group them together so I could turn one of them off separately, but I like the idea of treating them as one single thing much of the time. So now I can create groups like that dynamically in the UI instead of elsewhere. So that that also helped me simplify a bunch of automations.
And for what it's worth, there seems to be a thing you can do in the UI that I didn't know you could do with YAML. So maybe you couldn't do it with YAML. And that is, if you make a thing part of a group, you could hide the original thing.
That's new.
Which works great for my wife. She has a lamp in her office that has 5 light bulbs in it. And I replaced that with 5 cough RGB light bulbs, and they all show up in Home Assistant separately. But I wanted one control to control them all, and she doesn't need to be able to control each one individually, so I hid the original one. So now she just has a single thing for lights in her office.
Yeah. And that's the same sort of thing. There's occasionally times when I want to control some of these things individually, but most of the time I don't.
No, I understand. In my office, I often want all of the lights on or off, but sometimes, like especially late at night, I'll want just the light over the 3D printer on, or just the couple lights on my side of the office on. And I like being able to do that. Speaking of which, speaking of these cough lights,
Yeah.
I now have 24 of the big bulbs in the house.
Yeah.
And 5 of the little bulbs in the house, the normal bulbs.
Yeah, I bought one of their A19s. It's sitting in a bag for a project that I haven't had time to get to because it's been a busy bit.
And the cough plugs, they did get back in stock, and I ordered a dozen of them.
Yep. I need one. But again, you have more needs than I do. You have more space.
I am glad that I moved my network to a 10 dot instead of the 192.168.
Yeah, I'm on a 10 dot. Although I'm only using one aspect of it right now. Eventually, I'll have to go above 255 devices.
My router tells me I have 97 devices connected to my Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Luckily, I have more than one access point, or else I might overload things. But anyway, in regards to Home Assistant, did you try the Switch as X capability? Which is another
I have not had the opportunity to yet.
Well, I have a lot of essentially switches in the wall that I wired in. So the Tasmota flash switches that I've mentioned a few times.
Yes.
So most of them are controlling lights. So the ability for me to disable it as a switch and tell it to act like a light also, again, simplified a bunch of things. Because it's a light, yeah, it's in reality a switch, but I want it to behave like a light, and when I say I want to turn on lights, I want it to turn on, because it's controlling a light. Same thing with a fan. It allows you to say, okay, this switch is connected to a fan, treat it like a fan, which, again, is what it is. So there are a few of those in there. You can also configure all of the helpers via the UI. So they've added in, the ability to do all sorts of them. So not just...
there are a lot.
Yeah, and these are things you could always configure in YAML, but it's nice to be able to dynamically spin them up.
What do we got now? We've got a button helper. You can change the device type of a switch, a counter, a date or a time, a derivative sensor, a drop down, a group, an integration, meaning like calculus type integration. Yeah. A min, max, mean, median sensor, a number, a text, threshold sensor, timer, times of day sensor, toggle, and utility meter. And what was I doing with the... Oh. One of the things that annoys me on the times of day sensor...
Yeah.
Is from the UI, you can't make a times of day relative to sunset or sunrise. Well, but you can via YAML.
Yeah. Also, you can't make a time of day sensor relative to a time sensor that I could figure out. I may not have just not figured that one out yet. So I had to do that in YAML also, which is not the end of the world, but it would be nice if I could say I want a binary sensor that activates if it's within this time range as dictated by this other sensor. So I have, for example, I think I was mentioning this to you, I did some YAML for garbage and recycling. So the city says that I'm supposed to put up my garbage at 4 p.m. and so I have a sensor that says if it is based on the day of the date is generated as a sensor. So based on that, I figure out essentially this range of time where I want the sensor to be true. That would also be a nice thing to be able to do without having to put it in as a YAML event, because I do that all the time. Or in this case, I do it at least twice a week when my garbage has to go out. So there are...
Interesting.
What, your garbage doesn't go out twice a week?
No.
Oh, my recycling goes out once a week. Also, they're talking about bringing back composting.
Okay.
It's a good for the environment, but a pain in the neck to do. Essentially, you have to have a separate bucket full of rotting food. Anyway, that's the simple explanation of how composting works. Anyway, so that was the big story that I really wanted to talk to you about, but there are some other things that went on. For example, the people at Google delayed when legacy G Suite users have to start paying, and they claim there will be a no-cost waiting list.
Ooh.
So
what does that mean, a no-cost waiting list?
Well, first of all, they've moved the date where they're forcing you to do things to June 1st.
Okay.
They say that they're going to offer a no-cost transfer option. But that would move people to a free Gmail address, so they're not offering what I was really hoping for. But I've been going on the G Suite Legacy Migration Reddit to see what people are saying.
Yes.
Most people who are in my boat, which is the family level account, where everybody in the group is part of your family and you're not a business, pointed out that Office 365 and other competitors do have a family level for their product. And what we're willing to pay, but what we really want is a family product. Because essentially what we are paying so much for to get to the lowest level of workspace is a whole bunch of features that none of us have any use for as families.
Okay.
I'm not sure how you feel about that.
I
meant in terms of whether or not the features of Google Workspace are ones families might care about. Just to give you an example, if you give them $6 a month, which is the business starter program, in addition to a custom email domain, which of course is the one feature people want.
Yep.
Well, let's say all the other features are on top of that, and let's say the 30 gigabytes of cloud storage. So here are the other things that you get. You get the ability to have 100 participants in a video and voice conferencing system on Meet.
Nope, don't care about that.
Don't care either. By the way, until you pay $12 a month, you can't actually save your meeting recordings. Even though, this is the fun part, even though you are paying for storage. You also get, of course, chat team messaging, which, again, I sort of care about, but I get that with a Gmail account. So I'm looking for things that I don't get with a Gmail account.
Right.
And other than the 100 users and the meeting length of 24 hours in a Google Meet thing, there really isn't that much that I care about. So I am paying $6 a month for an email address. Which, again, market rate is not, let's say, reasonable.
Nope. Especially Soho will give you a lot of what Google gives you, and the custom domain for free.
Yeah. So if you look online for about, I think it's, let me find the pricing for Office 365 Family, which is the closest competitor. Again, there are plenty of other ones. There's Zoho. I'm just saying that's probably the closest equivalent in the overall space. So 365 Family is $99 a year for up to 6 people, with 1 terabyte of storage per person. So we're back to, I do not want 365, but, and there are plenty of other options. But what I'm saying is I don't understand why they can't say, we realize that people who have Gmail might want a custom domain. We should have a consumer as opposed to a product. Our competitors have such a product. Why can't we? But we're back to short-sightedness on the part of Google, I think. in trying to extract business level prices from people instead of saying we recognize who you are. Let's give you a product offering that actually is for the type of use you're doing. Anyway, moving along. Apparently now you can share your Google TV movies with others using family sharing, which a lot of other services allow. So you can now create a Google family. Yay.
I'm sorry, I just find it funny.
Why? You used to be the one saying that. I was trying to recapture the energy.
I know.
Yeah.
It's cool.
If you are a Plex user, which, as you know, I've been reinvigorating my use of Plex to store all of my ripped content that I've been slowly ripping. They picked up essentially streaming services tricks. So instead of realizing that there are plenty of streaming services out there and that is not necessarily a way to make money, they should do what they're known for, which is being a media server. Apparently, they've decided that there's going to be a brand new section for Discovery where it'll essentially help you search across all of your streaming platforms, which you then, of course, cannot watch in Plex because Plex is not a streaming aggregator. You would still need. But again, you can search for movies you don't have in your own collection. Okay. Sorry, some of these stories I read like 3 weeks ago, so I have to remind myself of what we were talking about. It's been a few weeks. Google Maps added in, you can now pick the best route based on toll pricing.
Interesting. I guess this is important if you live in an area with tolls, which you do.
I do, but
I got all the tolls.
But there's something that's more important to me.
What's that?
Well, you've heard me mention this. I want to be able to set thresholds where sometimes I do not want to start diverting unless the amount of time I'm going to save is going to be significant. So I don't want to start going down 15 local roads, making 5 left turns instead of staying on the highway in order to save 60 seconds. And Google doesn't really understand this concept of I'm on a road, it's straight. Google will also be adding in details like where traffic lights and stop signs are, where they have that information, and the shapes and width of a road, including medians and islands. So they're going to try to essentially be more detailed on the terrain around you. If you are a fan of Google hardware, they have unified their security reward program. So this is for bugs. Essentially, Nest and Fitbit are joining up with, of course, Pixel in one single program, which will reward you for finding vulnerabilities in any sort of Google-related device.
Nice. Good, yep. Right?
You can now access the Google Recorder from the quick settings menu. It's not enabled by default, but you can essentially add a tile for it. Not much there, but again, this would have been much more impressive if it was a shorter list of things to talk about, but as I said, we have 3 weeks worth of things. If you are using a version of Android that supports 64-bit, which are of course all the newer ones, Android might start warning you if you run a 32-bit app. So essentially telling you that you might be running something old. Here are a few other ones that I don't think are much discussion topics. The At a Glance widget on Pixel phones will start showing your connected Bluetooth devices.
That's useful, right?
Yeah. Amazon and Roku extended their streaming deal without any of the drama that Google and Roku went through.
Alrighty.
If you use Firefox, apparently Industrial Light and Magic has created a Firefox extension to ensure colors are consistent across devices.
How the heck do they do that?
Essentially, it's to manage color calibration.
Well, how do they know what how does the magic?
Yes, that's why they're called Industrial Light and Magic.
I don't think it works.
I don't think it works perfectly either. I think that the idea is that this would make it a little easier to flip the preferences to make sure that you are consistent about how your color rendering is going. So you have color rendering for Firefox, you have color rendering done by the OS. This just tries to sort of harmonize it.
All right.
Yep. Again, pros and cons.
Nope. Magic.
Yes, Industrial Light and Magic. We've covered this. Moving along, apparently Android Auto's Media Picks, which is their option to...
No, don't skip.
Oh, you want to talk about that one?
Yep.
Okay. This one seemed appropriate for you when I found it. 5 things you'll hate about switching from Android to iOS. So how many of these things, Jerry, do you hate? I'll read them and you tell me if you hate it. Notification management on iOS is annoying.
Oh my God, so true. So not only is the management annoying, but I miss a lot of notifications that I just got on my Android. Now
you can always return, Jerry. Android.
This is particularly annoying because these are notifications like, "Hey, your wife just sent you a message." Well, the notification pops up on my phone, but it's quiet and the screen is off, so I don't see it. And until the next time I pick up my phone. And then if I happen to bump my phone so that it shows the notification, but I'm not looking at it, the next time I pick up my phone, it doesn't show me the notification. So annoying.
My biggest problem right now with notifications involves... let me try to explain this. I had to install this app for two-factor at work. And at work, I like to put on Do Not Disturb, but Do Not Disturb turns off the notification of two-factor. So I have a choice, be able to access my devices when I log in and get the prompt that I have to click on my phone in order to do the two-factor, or occasionally get beeps in the office from my phone. So I'm getting all these new work problems, after not having been at work for very much over the last few years. Now I have to deal with all these work problems related to my phone. Anyway, here's the next one. Google apps aren't as intuitive on iOS.
They're fine.
Layout customization is limited on iOS.
It's getting better, but it is so very much, yes. It's very true.
Shopping is a pain.
I haven't really run into this because I don't really shop on either, so I can't say.
And the final one, which I don't know if this is so much of an annoyance, no screen mirroring with Netflix. So essentially, Netflix doesn't support AirPlay.
Interesting. Any place that I would be able to use AirPlay,
yep.
I already have Netflix installed there, so it doesn't make any sense to use it from my phone.
I'm thinking of leaving Netflix. I kept it on a lot for my father, who likes to watch it. And technically speaking, since my parents maintain a residence in the same building, since they're also my landlords, even though they're in Florida most of the time, I consider that a household. Although I gather Netflix doesn't consider it that anymore because they're trying to crack down on what they consider to be account sharing. But as I said, by my definition, it isn't. But theirs is the one that matters. So, but even he isn't watching very much on Netflix lately. Although I did watch that really weird show, Russian Doll, which came out with its 2nd season.
Really? And how was it?
Very, let's say, hard to understand at times, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Are you familiar with this show?
No.
It's somewhat strange. The first season is the lead character caught in essentially a time loop, essentially that ends with them dying over and over again, which is not that's not a new idea. But I thought they did something very different with it. And in the 2nd season, there's a time-traveling subway train. So that just links together some of my favorite science fiction tropes and public transportation, which I happen to have an interest in. So nothing like historic New York City, public transportation, and time travel. Always fun. And
what's it called?
Russian Doll. Also, extra points to the lead character for being able to correctly identify an R32 subway car. Not everybody can.
I did? Really? Huh.
Why? Can you identify an R32
okay,
subway?
was it... so are you saying that it's good?
Mixed. I'm saying that there were a lot of elements that I really liked about it, and there were some other things I didn't like so much. But that's every show. You can't like everything. I thought it was worth watching.
Russian Doll.
Yeah. Again, it takes a little... it's interesting. I'm curious if anybody listening had any opinions on that show, if they saw it.
I am adding Russian Doll to my playlist.
It's also somewhat unsatisfying in the sense that you really have to think about exactly what the conclusion of it is. But they are probably going to go for one more season if Netflix doesn't cancel them like they do pretty much every other show that people liked. They're having problems right now again.
So this is like wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
As I said, it's an interesting show. It's hard to explain it other than what I did, but it just has so many interesting elements that it's worth watching just to sort of unpack them.
All right.
Anyway, cool. The Android Auto essentially media picks, which is their suggested songs, is rolling out to more people. I've seen the little symbol come up when I've been in my car, but I'm not allowed to click it.
Why?
Because the period between Passover and Shavuot, there isn't very much music.
Okay.
Tradition.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah. Also, I probably think that their suggestions would not suit me, being as I have a somewhat eclectic point of view.
But if anybody would know that, it would be Google.
The night. Let's put it this way: there was that night that there was the big storm that caused my internet to go out and caused me to miss an episode, which caused this chain of events that caused us to miss several weeks.
Right.
So that night, or that afternoon before it got dark, and this was while I was upstate, the road started to flood because the sewer was clogged up with, let's say, plant matter. So like leaves and other matter. So the entire road was flooded, which is probably why the internet went out. But I took a picture, essentially, of the road flooded. And Google, after these pictures were uploaded to Google Photos, seemed to think that I was on some sort of camping trip by a river.
I don't know, but I found these results on search.
I triggered one of the devices. Yeah, anyway, but you get the idea. Google knows some stuff, and sometimes it's surprising what it knows. But it does make mistakes, as you know. Moving along, Android 13 may support multiple eSIMs, even if a phone wasn't built for it.
Interesting. Cool.
Well, again, why?
How?
The simple truth is, eSIM is an electronic SIM. So, why can't it? Why can't there be multiple ones on there? In theory.
But aren't those like separate parts of? I mean, those are like separate operating systems, right? Separate systems entirely.
It's
communicate via
an embedded
API.
chip. Well, it's an embedded chip, so apparently there may be a way to allow multiple profiles to be used on a single embedded chip. So this is a whole potential thing. So eSIM requires a small component on the motherboard, which again, apparently that component can support multiple SIM profiles in theory. Either way, dual SIM I don't see why I should be limiting myself to one SIM. It's essentially an encryption key. at its simplest. So it's credentials. Why can't I have more than one credential on my phone?
Okay. I don't understand how I thought the SIM card area was completely out of reach of the operating system.
It is. That doesn't mean you can't you can't do other stuff with it. This may be a capability on those chips, but remember, it has to interface with it. So you can tell it, you have to be able to tell it to load whatever eSIM onto the chip that you get over the network. Therefore, there should, even with the existing software, there should be a way to load more than one profile.
I don't know. I mean, clearly, okay.
Yeah, if they're looking at it, it must be possible.
Yeah, I will admit ignorance and move on.
Okay. You'll soon be able to live stream your Meet conferences to YouTube. So essentially, Hangouts on Air is back.
Oh, yay. Are we going to do that?
Maybe. That would save.
Does that mean I have to load up Meet?
We've tried it a few times.
Really should have been called MEAT. I mean, come on.
I don't know, but if I'm paying $6 a month to get extra Meet privileges, maybe I should use them.
Yes. We could have a 24-hour podcast.
Why not?
Because no.
I didn't say it was live. I'm saying we could be broadcasting 24 hours, but we could get reruns. Anyway, Google Workspace's new security feature will scramble your data before it's uploaded. So we're back to client-side encryption across Workspace. Yay. Google continued its somewhat incomplete or inconsistent usage of policies. They terminated a company's Play Store account because a former employee violated policies 3 years after leaving. So essentially, because one of the accounts happened to have been formally connected to something, it has shut down everything.
Maybe it took 3 years to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, but to quote one individual on this, we are living in a climate of fear. Without doing anything wrong or crossing any red line, not only all apps in the account have been removed, we are also threatened not to open a new account, as Google will close it immediately. So essentially, they need to fix some of their heavy-handed policies. Because this is what happens when you just shut things down without actually talking to people first.
Yeah, well.
Yep. Moving along, and I'm going to skip a few here. Ubiquiti sued a journalist alleging defamation and coverage of a data breach. So I thought this was relevant because I actually have used Ubiquiti products. I believe you have also.
Yes, I very much have a lot of Ubiquiti in my home network.
Yeah, but they essentially decided to sue Brian Krebs for defamation because, again, he covered a data breach.
Cool.
Again, finding old apps could get harder, and this is, of course, because apparently the Play Store said that apps that are not supporting fairly recent versions of Android will not be available for discovery installation on newer devices.
Interesting.
And they're saying it has to target an API level within 2 years of the latest major Android release. So anything that hasn't been updated in 2 years will be hidden. However, they're saying this will affect new users, which means if you already have the app, you will be able to reinstall it. So the idea is they will not let you discover old apps.
Well, I guess kind of okay.
Well, again, I have to look on my phone and see how many of my apps have not been updated in over 2 years. Usually, if it's gotten that far, I assume that's, that there might be a reason why. and try to look for an alternative. Not very aggressively, but I occasionally. So there was one I just got rid of a little while ago. For that reason, the developer has abandoned it, and I know that APIs are a moving target. Anyway, let's see. This one happened to me. A Pixel update randomly changed users' sound notifications. This drove me crazy.
I bet that was freaky.
Especially since it didn't choose like a random like Bing noise. It actually was choosing a music file from my phone. Even weirder, it was Jewish reggae. Anyway, that's a whole other... Jewish subgenres is a whole other conversation. A Jewish song of the reggae style.
I didn't even realize that was a thing, but hey, why not?
I didn't say it was a big thing. It is a thing.
I didn't say it was a big thing.
Yeah, I have 7,000. I have 7,000. I have 7,000 tracks. That's a lot of different possibilities for weird musical mashups. Anyway, Raspberry Pi had an OS update, which includes Wayland, Bluetooth improvements, and most importantly, the default user will no longer be Pi. So they've decided on install they will prompt you to create a user who is not Pi. The same way that other systems have said we're not going to give you a user called admin. When you first set up the thing, we're going to ask you to pick a username. So this is just getting with the security times.
I didn't know it would do that. But
it will.
I don't want it to do that.
What? Always do Pi or prompt you to create your own username?
Well, I always create my Raspberry Pi images using the Raspberry Pi Imager.
Yeah, but no, this isn't during the imaging phase. This is during first boot.
Oh, I don't want it to do it during first boot because I almost never have a monitor hooked up to my Raspberry Pi. Or a keyboard.
Yeah.
Or a mouse.
I always have one when I first configure it and then I unplug it very simply. Usually right after I enable SSH.
I enable SSH as part of the imager.
Yeah, it's possible the imager would do it. I didn't actually check because I haven't had to flash a Pi in a while.
There's a secret menu on the imager. It's like hit alternate shift G, enter F4 something.
Yeah,
I'm kidding, of course. But there's a secret menu where you can set things like you can go ahead, the imager will put on your Wi-Fi settings, your password, static IP address, whether to enable SSH, stuff like that.
Yeah, I just haven't looked to see if the imager would do it because I always image on the command line in Linux, so I wouldn't have paid much attention to that. And moving along, Comcast and Charter have teamed up for a new hardware venture. They want to develop a next-generation streaming platform on a variety of branded 4K streaming devices and smart TVs.
Ooh.
I don't know if I trust the people at Charter.
I would absolutely not buy a Comcast or a Charter TV.
I also have the problem.
Do it.
I recently was looking for a TV that did not have any smart in it. You know how hard that is to find nowadays?
Yes, it's difficult.
Yeah, well, here we are. More than
doable, but difficult.
Yeah,
and not on the super high-end TVs.
Well, how about the sort of easier, even if it has the smarts, why can't I disable it and make it act like a dumb TV? But anyway, my annoyance at that aside, I noticed this fact in this Verge article that more than 1 in 3 of every smart TV sold in the US and Canada was a Roku TV model. And of course, you know, Fire TV and Google are growing in that market as well.
I thought Roku had lost.
No, well, I'm saying it's still a third of the market. That's not a bad number. That's not a majority, but it's still not a bad number.
No, but out of all of the different people that make TV, 1 in 3 is a pretty good number.
That's what I said. It's just not a majority. They're not the largest, but I'm assuming if they're doing a third and Amazon and Google are splitting the rest, along with, I would say, unaffiliated TVs, Vizios, SmartCast, and whatever other like little players there are.
Well, there's LG. Don't forget, there's LG that has got to have a large portion. Vizio.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd like to see the overall stats. This was just one interesting thing. I didn't realize that Roku had that much of the market, but
I didn't either.
Yep.
Go Roku. I mean, they're my box of choice.
Yep. So, because we decided we would go for an hour, I'm going to pick a few stories and I'll save the rest for next week.
All right.
Here are a few that I thought were interesting. Android 14 got an official internal code name. It will be Upside Down Cake. I just thought
Although, how many other options were there for you?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
I don't think there's very many.
I'm sure I could think of a U named dessert. Give me until next week.
Yes, but could you think of a non-eclectic U shape or U starting?
Are we going to get back to the halva thing? Because I'm still upset about that one.
Dude,
Get
ain't
over
nobody ever heard of halva.
I'll tell that to all the people I know who like halva. Anyway, Twitter alternative Mastodon now has an official Android app, which is somewhat relevant, being as some people are a little worried about Twitter right now.
Oh my God.
Some rich guy is going to buy it.
If, you know, I was driving my daughter to school this morning.
Yeah.
And we were talking about just in general. And I said, you know, there are certain events that happen in your life that future generations will talk about, that will be in history books.
Spending
You know, for
40
my
billion on
generation-
Twitter is one of them.
For my generation, it was things like 9/11 and the Challenger explosion. For her generation, I think Elon buying Twitter is going to be one of those events.
I would have thought pandemic, but yeah. Anyway, hopefully in that vein, since we mentioned 9/11 and pandemic, hopefully Twitter is not in the same vein as both of those. But anyway, how about let's find something on here that's more upbeat. Oh, here we are. The people at Pine 64, who make all of the interesting open source hardware, are making wireless earbuds called the Pine Buds with user flashable firmware.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm a little intrigued with what people will do with user flashable firmware on it, but apparently the example is they can alter the touch controls, change the sound signature profiles, adjust resonance for a specific user's ear canals, or use them as hearing aids. But I get a kick out of all the interesting things that the people at Pine 64 do. Like, you remember the watch, which I played with.
Yep.
So it intrigues me. A few other things. Let's see. What can we quickly talk about? Oh, yes. IMDb is being rebranded Amazon Freevee.
Wait, are you serious?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Sometime in the coming days, it will no longer be IMDb TV. It will be Freevee. Excuse me.
Come
As
on,
of
man,
yesterday.
I want to use. There are shows on IMDb TV that I like.
Yes, because you want to watch Judy Justice.
I don't know who that is.
That's the woman from Judge Judy with her own show.
Oh, no, I want to watch Leverage Redemption.
Okay, well, that would get me to watch Freevee, but I think the name Freevee is stupid.
Naming services is hard.
They're owned by Amazon, and why don't they just call themselves Amazon TV? Well, no, Prime is like the premium thing. They can take Amazon Prime TV and Amazon TV, merge it together, and say that it's one single streaming offering, but there's a free tier and there's a Prime tier, and they have different things on them. I don't understand. So instead they need a separate app and they need a separate name, and it's Amazon. Just deal with it.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
The founder of Pebble has detailed product choices that led to failure on the 10th anniversary of the original Kickstarter launch. That's not something I'm going to read, but I will leave it in the show notes if anybody's interested in reading it. It is a good read.
I imagine. Lessons learned that are actually lessons and that were actually learned are almost always good reads.
Yep. And in addition, let's see what else we have here. There are a few things we'll save for next week, but let's see here. How about this one? AccuWeather brought back the concept of dark skies hyperlocal weather alerts. However, the temperature icon is now in a paywall.
Sure, because that makes sense.
Well, no, just of all the things, it's they have a Premium Plus subscription, which is $19.99 a year, which essentially removes ads and enables alerts to tell you about weather conditions around you, which again is one of the old dark sky features. But apparently, one of the issue is a basic feature is behind the paywall. So AccuWeather for Android now does not allow you to have a persistent temperature icon in your status bar unless you pay for premium. So that is what you are paying. You have to pay $20 a year for.
I mean,
no, I'm just saying. I understand you want to receive alerts or you want an ad-free experience that you should pay $20. I really can't see paying $20 to restore the temperature icon to my status bar.
It is probably the most used feature they have.
I know, but it's going to annoy people.
It may annoy them, but it's...
Well, usually premium offerings are supposed to enhance your features. You're not supposed to take away features you're already providing.
Well...
No, I'm saying in general, that's what gets people annoyed. It's you are offering this as part of your free package.
Stuff ain't free.
I'm aware.
I mean, the people who are working on this got to eat.
I agree with you.
It's either...
Although I don't think the people at AccuWeather
get paid from advertising, or you give them money directly.
Yeah, I just think that this particular feature is one that I think is not something that should go behind a paywall.
Okay.
It's a temperature icon. It's just anyway. It's not a value add in my opinion. Anyway. So that brings us to the end of this week. Jerry, I have to ask you this now just so that we avoid any further communication confusion. May 5th, 2022, are you available for a podcast?
I believe so.
Okay, if not, please inform me. Do you need me to send you a text message reservation reminder?
No.
Just checking.
Maybe.
By the way, you're not the only person I do that to. Once a week, I also have a meeting that I attend with multiple people online, and there's one person who has told me that they need reminders to arrive at the meeting, so I periodically send them a reminder because they keep forgetting to show up otherwise. Yeah. So at one point, they just said, stop reminding me, and then 2 weeks later, it was, start reminding me again. But anyway, thus is life. So
that brings us to the end of the first episode in a month.
The first full episode. I am counting 581.1, which was the episode I did last week where I just bemoaned missing you as a co-host.
Yep.
I also proved to myself that I don't know. Nobody said anything or wrote any complaints in, but I don't know if I could do this podcast solo. And if that me talking to myself didn't prove that last week. On the other hand, nobody complained, so it's quite possible everybody thought I could talk to myself effectively. Problem is, nobody answers when you talk to yourself. Or if somebody answers, you have...
That's a good thing. The problem is when somebody starts answering when you're talking to yourself.
Yeah, yes, because if somebody started answering, that would indicate you had bigger problems. I'm just saying the problem... I'm not saying it is a problem for me, because that hopefully indicates I have good psychological health. I'm saying the problem is it isn't as fun to talk about what you are passionate about if there's nobody to listen and engage with. It's that engagement that I'm referring to. So shall we adjourn until next week when we will once again talk about this unless something happens?
All right. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it.
Until next time, everybody, and feel free to write in on any of your topics, including Jerry, we missed you.
Or you didn't.
Yeah, or that's fine. Or episode 581.1, or how horrible the sound quality is, because I spent about an hour before the podcast trying to figure out why something that's worked one way for years and has not had a hardware change is suddenly working a different way. And if it doesn't fix itself, I'm just going to have to buy more hardware, and that never seems to work for me. Because throwing money at a problem does not seem to solve it. Anyway,
Enough.
well, I think it might be something sorted out, but we'll see. Anyway, goodbye, everybody. Until next week.
Goodbye.
Recording stopped.